Hello and welcome back. So in the last video, we added our or defined our model, okay, with the different fields with their types, okay. Now we want to define our indexes, okay. Remember I just briefly explained what the benefit of indexes. The indexes will allow us to be able to search the table rows, okay. So if you have a billion rows in your table, if you don't have an index, okay, you don't set an index and then you want to search for a particular row by the username or by the email, and imagine the row is the 1 billionth row. Without an index, it's going to take a lot of time, okay. It's going to take a lot of time for it to retrieve that particular row, because it's to go through the all the rows to search for the particular field. But with indexes will help us search through the rows quickly, okay. But you have to be very careful. Indexes take up spaces in your table, so if you have too many indexes, it can still slow up your database query, okay. So you just have indexes on fields that you are going to use. It doesn't make sense to add indexes to all of these fields and then you're not going to use them, okay. Only add indexes to fields that you are going to use, that you are going to query by. For us, we're going to query by the username and by the email. So those are the only two fields we need to add indexes to, okay. So to add an index, right here, you can add the curly braces, okay, and we can define indexes. It's going to be in an array, okay. We are adding two indexes. The first one, add an object, we add the property unique. The indexes have to be unique because the usernames will have to be unique. And then the fields is called email, okay. So with this, we have added an index, or the SQLite will add an index to the email field. And the second one is set unique to true, and then the field property is username. Now the reason why I added the indexes to these two fields is because I'm 100% sure we are going to query by username and email, okay. So it doesn't make sense to add indexes for country when you are not likely to use or query the database for a row or rows with the particular country, okay. So this is how we add our indexes. Now we want to quickly add or use bcrypt, okay. So to use that, if we go back to SQLite page, if we scroll down, go to other topics and then hooks. If you go to hooks, okay, so there are some lifecycle events, hooks also known as lifecycle events, that we can use, okay. So if we want them to perform some kind of operations before the data is added to the table, or before after the data is added to the table, we can use the lifecycle event or hooks, okay. And let's see the different lifecycle events that are fired. There is the before bulk create. So if you want to do a bulk create, maybe you want to create bulk documents at the same, multiple documents at the same time, it fires this event. If you want to destroy updates, before validate, okay. Now for you have after validate. Now you have for a single document that you want to add to the table, you have the before create. So this is fired before your data is added to the table. Now what we are going to do is we are going to use this before create event to hash our password, okay. We don't want our password to be entered into the database as a plain text, okay. That is why we installed bcrypt, or if you are using bcrypt.js for me, or for you, you are using bcrypt, okay. So let's go ahead and use this before create event, okay. Now if you maybe later want to perform some other operations before the data is saved or before the data is updated, you can use one of these lifecycle hooks. But now we are going to use only the before create, and let's see how we can use that. So down here outside the model, let me close this. I'll call auth model dot add hook, and then the name of the hook is before creates, okay. So this is the name of the model, or of the hook rather, that we are adding to the model. And then what do we want to do? We're going to add an async callback, okay? And then we get the auth model, okay? So we want to be able to hash our password before the data is added to the table, okay? And to hash the password, we're using bcrypt. If you're using bcrypt and bcrypt.js, they have the same methods, okay? So if you're using bcrypt, it's still fine. So I'll call this hashed password. It's going to be a string, and it's going to be await, and then hash. I'll get it from bcrypt.js, okay? Now this is an asynchronous way of hashing. There's the hash sync, which is the synchronous way, and then hash, which is the asynchronous way. Now, to get the data, we get it from auth.dataValues.password. Now we need to cast this as a string, okay? So because it doesn't really know what type of model, it doesn't actually know what type of model, we're just setting the model. But the model will always return these data values, and the data values has the different properties we have defined here, okay? So all of these properties, they are inside these data values, okay? And then this hash, it takes in two properties. It takes in a salt, the string and the salt. So the salt is just the number of times it's going to hash the password. We can create a salt round here, a constant variable. I'll say const salt round. I'll set it equal to 10. Okay. So the higher the number, the higher the hashing algorithm, the number of times the hashing algorithm will be performed. But you have to be very careful. If you add a very high number, then when decrypting the password, it's going to take a longer time. So for example, as an example, if you add or use a salt round of 1 million, then when it's hashing the password, it will hash it 1 million times. And then if you want to decrypt, it will decrypt it. It will go through the round 1 million times, and that could be very, very slow. Okay. So just add a number here. I think 10 is sufficient. Okay. For us. Okay. At this point in time, 10 is sufficient. And then all we just need to do is we set this value. We set it equal to the hashed password. Okay. So before SQLite creates the row or adds the row into the table, we hash the password. Whatever the password is, we hash it, and then we add the password hash password back to the password property. Okay, so this is what we do, and then we want to create another method. I'll call this auth model.prototype.compare password. So this will be used when we want to compare the user's password. Okay, so if you want to add a method to the model, this is how you add the method. This could be anything. This could be my password check. Okay, whatever. This is just the name, but I'll call it compare password. And if you want to add to a model, use auth model.prototype. I believe if for those of you that already have experience with Mongoose and MongoDB, you have seen something like this. Okay, and then for us, we'll say async auth. We pass auth model. Okay, right here. Or instead of doing this, let's use the regular function. I think in hashing the password, if you try to use the arrow function, it returns some kind of errors. So just go ahead and use your regular function. Pass the password of type string, and then the hash password of type string. Okay. And then this is going to return a boolean, promise of type boolean. Okay, so what is happening here? We want to use this method to compare if the user logs in, because they will log in with their plain text password. Okay, so before we allow them to log in, we are going to check the password that they added, the plain text password, does it match the hashed password in the database? And we are going to use that with the compare method. So return compare. So this compare comes from bcrypt.js, and I'll pass password and hashed password, and it returns a boolean. Okay, you can see right here it returns a boolean. Okay, so it will compare the plain text password with the hash password in the database. If they match, it will return true, but if they don't match, it will return false. Okay, so this is how we use the before hook, and we create a function. One last thing here is we can export the model. Okay, so I'll say export auth model, and then here I'll say auth model. This will be used to create the table, auth model.sync. Okay, and then we pass empty curly braces. Okay, this will be used to create the table. Okay, if the table does not exist. So once we start the server, this method will be called. It will check, okay, does the table exist? No. If the table does not exist, it will create the table. But if the table exists, it will do nothing. Okay, now also note, we talked about this false/true. Please don't add this. Okay, only use this locally for development. If you maybe want to clear all the data you have in the table, you want to create new data, new set of data. Okay, so you can set false to true. If you set it this way, that means every time you restart your server, it will always drop the table and then create a new table. Okay, so don't do this. Only use it if you want to for testing. Okay, so I'll say this always deletes the table when there is a server restart. Okay, so this always deletes the table when there's a server restart. Don't do this. Maybe we might use it to see how it works, but don't add it so that you don't forget, and then when you deploy, your table will always be deleted and recreated, and you might be wondering why. Okay, so now we have our model. I think everything we need here is complete. We'll start creating our controllers to be able to use our model.